Hello and welcome to another episode of the Launch Lab podcast with Tom.
Yeah, hi. Again.
It's
like basically just live on this podcast.
Yeah, it looks like you're the favorite guest.
Well, I am your favourite guest. Surely.
You are. No, that's true. That's true. I wanted to talk today on how to build products users love, and as my favorite guest. But no, we don't. I think that the reason why I wanted, particularly having also your opinion is you, as a Launch Lab, gave me lots of valuable advice, and I just realized that it would be quite selfish for me to keep those advice that I find quite practical, but not only as a founder, but also that I can replicate to some of my clients. And I was like, so yeah, in some way you are actually the favorite guest of the show. On how to build products users love. I wanted to touch on, there is lots of big words like MVP, pain points, product market fit. At first, I didn't really understood what those words were for. So, and then even when you understand, I think that a lot of people have their own definition of it. So can you help us first with a bit of definitions? What are those terms? Why can't we just call things simple? What is an MVP first?
Well, before I do that, I'll just reintroduce myself in case people haven't seen the other couple of episodes that have been on. So, hi, I'm Tom again, the founder of LabWorks.io. We are a conversation design studio, a conversational AI studio startup, and we kind of work in using things like large language models to build kind of conversational assistants. We also are one of the largest publishers on Amazon Alexa in the world. And we've been doing kind of a lot of stuff in generative AI and kind of a lot of things that have been quite kind of hypey at the moment. My background, so I originally studied journalism at City, but I have been working as a designer, as a product designer for the last 8-9 years. So I've done quite a lot of kind of product work and product design work, both kind of for other companies like the BBC and Facebook and even the UK government, and for loads of kind of clients and stuff, and also within kind of LabWorks with our own product and stuff. And so I've kind of seen how it's been done across a lot of organizations and kind of seen the things that have worked and the things that haven't worked. And yeah, I've kind of advised a few of the startups here as well about kind of, some shortcuts and tricks you can use to kind of try and figure out whether people are going to kind of like your product or not. So hopefully I can share a few of those at least.
And one of those first, can we start by just making sure we all agreed on the same terms? What is an MVP?
So that's a minimum viable product. So that is it's the kind of the smallest thing that you can possibly build in order to kind of test your hypothesis. So I probably need to now explain what a hypothesis is. So when you are building a business or building a product, you are kind of formulating a hypothesis, like a statement that I believe that people are going to do this activity, or there is this problem that people are trying to solve, and that if I can solve this problem for them, people will pay me money for it, or so advertisers will pay me money for them to show it to them.
Is it an assumption then?
Yeah. Okay, all hypotheses are they're not really like an assumption makes it sound like, you know, you haven't kind of thought about it. Like the idea of our hypothesis is that it's like, okay, here is a thing that we are going to investigate. It's kind of the scientific method of doing startups. This all comes from a book called The Lean Startup that, if you haven't kind of read, is really kind of like essential reading before starting a startup. You know, it's a kind of ideology almost about how to kind of build startups in a successful way. And, you know, if you kind of follow the lean startup methodology, you will radically improve your chance of success. It's not the only technique that you can use, but it's a really important one.
So the minimum viable, the MVP, is relieving the smallest part or the smallest first answer or solution to a problem you're solving within this ideology of the lean startup, like the startup mentality.
I think that the thing with like kind of MVPs is that somehow kind of MVP is like really useful, but kind of people almost like forget that there's like a whole load of other stuff that you need to do before the MVP. They're like, okay, well, we're building an MVP, so we don't need to do any user research or market research or, like, you know, kind of design iteration or all of the other things that you're supposed to do before getting to an MVP. And then they build their MVP, which building an MVP can still take, you know, like 6 weeks or whatever, which, you know, if you're a startup and you don't have not much money, actually can be quite a lot. And you build your MVP and then nobody likes it and nobody uses it. You know, the idea is that, you know, your MVP shouldn't be your kind of first signal as to whether this is going to work or not. Like the MVP is like the kind of like the final hurdle that the kind of the product should get over. You should have already kind of validated through kind of user research and market research and kind of iterating designs and prototyping that, you know, it's really likely that this MVP is going to work, so that when you actually build it, like, you know, it should most of the time be fine.
But how do you make this MVP something that your users love? Like, how do you, because you talked a lot about the pre-MVP work, and I assume that the answer is somewhere here to be able to answer, how do you make a product that people love, or in this case, like, how do you make an MVP at least that people love?
Well, I mean, usually you don't make an MVP that people love. Like, you know, in fact, if people love your MVP, like, it's not an MVP. Like, you know, it kind of, what a minimum viable product means is like the absolute bare minimum that people will find acceptable, that they won't be like, I'm actually not going to use this because it's so bad. So it literally has to be like 1% better than I'm not going to use this to be a minimum viable product.
So why would people use it then? Because...
Well, the MVP is not your final product. You don't go and launch your MVP to kind of, you know, the world and be like, okay, all done now. Like, you know, like the MVP is like, it is like the final exam for your for your hypothesis. It's a bit like being a lawyer, that, you know, you kind of like, your MVP is like passing your legal exams. It doesn't mean that at the point you pass your legal exams, you never need to learn anything new or improve your skills, like, at all. Like, it's just it's like the first kind of like threshold that says, okay, this like works enough that we can kind of continue, that it is okay to put it out in the market, but it's not like the finished product.
It's interesting how you see MVP. For me, it was more on the other side, seeing it as the like the MVP is good enough, and you are solving a problem enough that people will actually want it, because there is no other, or the other alternative are so painful that you are the only one being able, even if your product is crap, that it's the only solution that, despite the fact that it's very bad, people are still using it because you are the only one innovating in this area. You see what I mean? Like, that's kind of the vision. It's interesting, the vision you had, like the exam, like the final stage. For me, it was more the, Yeah. know.
I don't think the two visions are different at all.
Yeah.
I think they're kind of exactly the same thing. That it's the MVP is like the kind of the smallest, easiest thing that you can build that people will actually use, even if they don't love it. I think the problem is the kind of like the word love, because building products that people love takes a lot of time and attention. It's like, to make a product that people love, it requires a level of like care and artistry that goes far beyond the MVP. I mean, Apple are like the kind of the most obvious example of this. That if you ever like open up an Apple product and look inside, it's absolutely immaculate. It's like everything, like all the kind of circuit boards and everything are like really neatly arranged. It's all like perfectly clean. It like compared to every other tech manufacturer, it looks as beautiful on the inside as on the outside. And like, why do they do that? Because like most people are never going to see inside an Apple product, but they do it. The fact that they do it is why people love Apple products, because they put that same level of care and attention into everything that they do, and that's what makes a product that people love.
So if you had a recipe, if there is one, to make a product that people would love, first, is there a kind of recipe you think that founders could follow to have a wonderful product first? And if there is one, can you guide us a bit through your kind of the...
Yeah, it's making a product that people love is like actually notionally like really, really easy, because all you need to do is just do your user research properly and listen to it. But actually in practice it's really, really difficult to take your user research and then fix all the things that you find that are problems in user research, because other things come into it, like how much money does the company have, like what's the return on investment of doing this work. Making a product that is absolutely seamless involves fixing every single bug, like kind of sanding down every corner, making everything absolutely perfect. And most startups, most companies cannot afford to do that level of work without losing money on the product. And so, a lot of kind of building product is trying to kind of strike the balance between that kind of like perfectionism and good enough. Like, how do you make something that is good enough that people love it without it like costing like all of the money in the company?
So are you saying that like, so then is it true to then compare what you are saying to the fact that building a product that uses love is more being close to being an artist than you see what I mean?
That's exactly right.
Like
that's a good analogy.
But then, do you need your customers to love you, or do you just need them to be practical? So you see what I mean? Like, what is the line? Like, because for me, it's kind of a struggling point, because how can you make people pay a recurring amount or give you money in exchange of value if they don't love you? And I assume then you are being practical, but then everyone can be practical. Like, you see what I mean? Like, whatever you are doing, I can just copy it in some shape or form. So my assumptions was at first, you need to be Apple, even if you can copy an iPhone. Everyone loves it. So if you don't need your customers to love you, how do you make them keep coming back to you?
I mean, there are lots of examples of businesses that customers don't particularly love, but are like very successful. I mean, Amazon, Amazon's website is objectively horribly designed and full of adverts, but the reason they are so successful is because they do the free shipping, and prices are cheap, and that is enough to keep people coming back time and again.
But as the case of Amazon, I would say that I personally love Amazon. The reason why is it's just so much convenient. Like right now, I've been currently moving house last week, and I can just order my new stuff to I don't even need to know where the so I do love Amazon. You see, like all of those successful startups, in some ways, like I think that there is an MVP stage, but it just feels like they all hit the mark of like people loving them. Otherwise, you can't. You see what I mean? Like being product market fit in at some point, isn't it that people are dragged and love what you're doing because you're solving a problem in such a way that.
But I mean, you love Amazon for a different reason, for like the reason that you love Apple. Like, you know, there is no artistry in Amazon.
No,
like, you know, it is not like it's not a good user experience, but it is also a good user experience because they really understand the bit that is valuable, which is being able to find the thing that you want and pay for it like quickly and get it delivered quickly, and like that is like the kind of the 3 steps that actually matter in like an e-commerce store, and all the other stuff is kind of like nice to have but not essential, and so, you know, you can get people to kind of use your product by really understanding clearly what the reason people use your product for is.
So if I'm trying to summarize what you're saying is that the way to make a product that people love is actually first not trying to make one that people love, but focusing on making one that is good enough to solve a problem. And that's like, I think that my take and the discussion, the way I'm summarizing it is more that people don't love a product, people love the way you are solving a problem. And I think that in the end, it doesn't really matter how good your product is how you are solving. Like, I don't love Amazon, I just love the fact that, now I don't need to actually take or go back 30 minutes before, and it's saving me time. So, and we can also talk about the case of ChatGPT. I just love the fact that I don't care about ChatGPT at all. It's just that, I hate spelling mistakes. This is my most important worries because I don't want to like be this lawyer sending mistakes, email with mistakes. And I love the fact that they're solving this problem to me. So is it, you see what I mean?
I do see what you mean. I actually think it's quite an interesting analogy that, you know, we don't have kind of necessarily any loyalty to Amazon in that, you know, if somebody else created an e-commerce store that did the same things like just as well, but you know, was like 2p cheaper or, you know, a little bit better designed, you might well switch. I think that it's interesting, kind of going back to the Apple analogy, whether the same thing is true with Apple, because people think of themselves as Mac users and Apple product users. And I think it would be more difficult for people psychologically to switch. I mean, you know, like the phone is like a great example. There are plenty of Android phones that are objectively better than Apple phones, but a lot of people use iPhone because the way that it makes them feel.
I think that's the main problem or one of the second problems that Apple is solving, not only exchanging information, but also the social stature. So I think that actually, I think that what is making them unique is that they are solving several problems with one product. And if there was a way for me to solve those problems that I have, which is like sending information, but kind of keep a kind of social stature, and on top of that, having good user-friendly experience, I could easily switch, but there is no viable alternative on the market. So I think that it's still, I think that to come back to this point of like how to do product that users love, my key takes, and I think that what we are really boiling down to is not focusing on building a wonderful product, but really focus on the problem of your customer. Like he should be the king of your product doesn't really matter. It's your customer that matters. And if you solve his problem in such a unique and wonderful ways, he loves you, whatever customer or whatever product you are. Is what I mean. I think that's the main take.
You're right. I think that's you know, that Apple have kind of understood that the status their products are status symbols, and that kind of selling them as a status symbol is providing additional value to the user, that makes it worth doing all this kind of additional work that costs money to do.
I would like to wrap up with the last point. We talked about love. Now I want to talk about hate. I'll start just with throwback a bit of like a personal anecdote, but my feeling and my take on why people don't love your product but hate your product is, my gut is that people had a clear problem. They were expecting your solution to bring a solution, and they are very mad at you because they're experiencing such a high problem and they're desperate to find a solution. I think that which is actually a good thing, because the fact that people hate you, it's a good indicator that there is a problem to solve here. I think that the worst thing that can happen, I don't know your thought on that, is like people being indifferent to you and your product. And I think that it's maybe in life in general, like the worst thing that can happen is like people being indifferent. Like if people loves you, fine. If they hate you, but you still have a strong reaction, and to come back to the product, what would be your take, like, if I tell you that, I've got a product, but everyone hates it. People, I don't know why, I've got angry emails, like, I've even had protest, like, you see what I mean? How do you take this factor into account in your market research and the product development?
I mean, yeah, you're right that like people don't tend to hate the product unless they kind of at least believe that the product should solve a problem for them, and it doesn't. People hating your product is actually like a really big problem if you kind of live in the world like app stores and stuff, though, because they're liable to leave a 1-star review, and it takes a lot of 5-star reviews to balance out a 1-star review. So yeah, it could be like really, really problematic, and I think it's actually it's part of it causes a kind of a problem with product development, that you often end up having to kind of build things that like nobody hates, even and you have to spend a lot of time focusing on kind of potentially a very small number of users that hate something, rather than on the kind of the 99% of people that are kind of perfectly happy with the product, in order to avoid getting those 1-star reviews. And that's a real problem when you actually come to kind of like do things at scale. And as far as I'm aware, there's no really good way around it. You kind of, you try to like make sure that you don't overpromise in your product, and you try to kind of make sure that the people that are using your product understand what it is for and what it is not for. So they should like, the people that kind of are going to hate it should like not ever use the product in the first place if you get your marketing right. But the reality is that doesn't always happen, and yeah, you have to just try and like manage it as best as you can. But yeah, trying to manage user expectations is a real challenge. In fact, I'd say that a large part of making product that people love is actually convincing them to love the product that you've made, rather than the other way around.
I love this the last part, especially when you said that you're setting some expectations, but then you're not hitting up to what they expected. So can it be a trick to like, or is it even a trick to say that, well, then just lower the expectation you're selling and then impress them by the delivery? Would it be a nice way of just avoiding any, because then I haven't promised you anything and I'm doing more, so.
The thing is, though, the users get their expectations from all sorts of places.
Okay. So this doesn't work.
You don't like. You might try to set expectations in your marketing or in your kind of like product onboarding or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they'll do it. And actually, like, a lot of the time, if you get like negative reviews or feedback, you're like getting it from people that are are like not who you not like shouldn't be using the product, like don't understand what it's for, like, you know, and you're like, oh well, I don't know what to do about you, because we're never going to fix this, because that's not what the product does. And like, and you know, and that's the real challenge. There's no good answer to that.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for today's episode. How to build products user love. I think we nailed it just by mentioning that your main focus should be how to make your customers love the way you're solving your problem, and do not focus on the product. And actually having a wonderful product is closer to having a masterpiece art. There's a part of luck and art, and you know, but in the end, the only thing that would matter is how well have you served and solved your customer's problem.
Yeah.
Do you have any final take on that one, or
do so much more research than you think? Like a good kind of like rule of thumb, you know, like to build a kind of like an MVP should take no longer than 6 weeks, and during those 6 weeks, you should be doing kind of like at least like 2 user interviews a day, while you're doing that. So, you know, you're looking at somewhere around 100 user interviews by the time your kind of MVP is ready. And obviously the kind of the content of those interviews will change over time. But if you go away and speak to 100 people that are going to use your product or would like to use your product about it, and you know, you're kind of like showing them design iterations and whatever, and you build an MVP, and then you take it back and test it all with them. If you get the thumbs up from all of them, then you're going to be in a really good position. You know, it's probably as close as you can come to guaranteeing success. And I can also guarantee that, despite that being like a really actionable like bit of advice that everyone could follow, absolutely no one will do it.
That's true.
Like, you know, and this is the thing I was saying like at the start is about like building there is a recipe for building products people love, and you know, and it's actually quite easy to do, but nobody does it, and so they won't.
They won't. Well, thank you so much. It was a great episode, wasn't it? I'll see you next week then. Cheers.